Redemption Radio, where your hosts Daniel, Cody, and Roy take on entertainment and the arts from a Christian worldview. If you like the podcast, you can join the discussion with other artists on our Facebook page by searching for The Art of Redemption. You can also find us on Twitter at AOR Podcast, and you can also find us, along with many other podcasts and bloggers, on the Theology Mix network by going to theologymix.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram for sneak peeks for upcoming episodes. And leave us a rating and review on iTunes or your favorite podcast catcher. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to the Art of Redemption Radio. I am one of your hosts, Cody Anderson.
Mr. Anderson, it's nice to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, I've always been amazed that we actually have like a character from the Matrix on the show.
Well, you know,
that's just kind of thrilling.
It is. I can, do some of those cool tricks.
Can you?
No.
Oh yeah, that's right. You, in like another life, you would probably be like a stuntman on Hollywood.
Right?
I
would like to be. I know one, but I am not one.
That's too bad.
Yes.
Well, I am your other host, Roy, the decapitated chicken.
Wow.
Upton.
That sounds bloody.
Well, you know the saying that I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off. Yeah. Well, that was painfully true this past week because I was on my way to an art class that begins at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is an ungodly hour to start anything. Like, there's a reason banking hours start at 9. It's because nobody has their life together.
Hey, that's not true. I worked at a bank. It's only open to the public at 9.
Oh, okay.
In the lobby. I was there at 7 o'clock every day, 7:30 every day, and we opened at 8. So.
Well, just because you were there and you were put together just means that you're just like superhuman. That it doesn't apply to anybody else.
Goes back to that Matrix
especially
reference.
To me. Yeah, Mr. Anderson. Good evening, Mr. Sorry. So what I was saying is this last week I was on my way to an art class and I was supposed to be bringing a box full of duct tape. I won't explain to you why I was bringing a box full of multicolored duct tape because that's a whole story in and of itself. Suffice it to say, I didn't bring the box. Oh. And so I made it all the way to the school and then realized that I hadn't brought the box. And at this point, it's like 4 minutes till class starts. And if you don't get there, like, a good while before class starts, it's likely that you won't find a parking spot. So I was like crossing both fingers, praying really hard that I'd find a parking spot. Because, of course, that's exactly how God works, right? He just beams down parking spots whenever you're in a tight jam and running late because you don't have your poop in a scoop.
Exactly.
Anyway, I realized I didn't have the box of tape, so I drove all the way back home, got the box of tape, drove all the way back. Of course, there wasn't a parking spot, so I had to park in the back lot, and then I had to walk all the way, so I'm like 15 minutes late. Ooh. Well, the teacher hadn't even started the class yet.
Sweet.
And then she says that we're not starting the project that I needed the tape for until the next class period. It's just like one of those moments where you just have to find a wall to like beat your head against.
Yes. And if you do that for an hour, you'll burn 150 calories.
Wow. That's impressive.
Exactly. Yeah, so
maybe that's what I should have done. It probably would have been more productive than what I was doing. But anyway, it just kind of brought, I guess, a little bit of humility my direction.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you think that you have your life under control. You think you have something figured out. And then it just all goes haywire in a matter of minutes for no apparent reason. So anyway, I'm... A lot of the times I look put together, but most of the time on the inside, I'm just a decapitated chicken.
That is unfortunate and very unfortunate. I always say I'm always running around like a head with my chicken cut off.
Nice.
Because apparently when you cut the head off of a chicken, it flops around and stuff, I guess. I don't know. I've never done it, but that's what I hear.
Yeah. I don't think I've done it personally, but I've actually witnessed some very similar things. But I'm sure we can save those stories for another podcast.
Different podcast at a different day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we are kind of getting down to the end of our formalism series. How do you feel about that?
I feel like I've learned a lot. I don't know how much I've retained. I always am trying to think, okay, what did we talk about the last time when I'm looking at something new or thinking about art or whatever. So I'm trying to put it to work because it's been somewhat new to me, some of the process in which that we talked about was it Feldman's method?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that, trying to re-go through that in my head and figure out exactly how to go about it rather than going backwards all the time. But no, I think it's been good. I've learned a lot, and I think it's been pretty informational just to kind of break it down to the basics. So, it's where I'm looking forward to the next series, but it's always fun to do a series, and it's always fun to move on to the next series as well. I mean, it's just it's fun to do.
Yeah, it's a fun podcast.
It is.
So I have been doing the exact same thing, just kind of running through my mind occasionally, like all of the different basic elements of two-dimensional art. So I'm like, okay, so I'm looking at this advertising for, whatever it is. What was I? I was really looking at an advertising. Oh yeah, for Brillo boxes.
Nice.
I know it's so Andy Warhol did these. You know how he does the Campbell soup cans?
Right.
Well, he did something very similar with this stuff called Brillo, and I don't even know what's in them. Like, what is Brillo? I have no idea. But he made like exact replicas of these Brillo boxes that are like department stores. I'm sure it's like a Quick Mix or Easy Mix or something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was looking at them and I was wondering what's the difference between the Brillo boxes that are like in the back room of the department store and the Brillo boxes that Andy Warhol makes. What makes one of them art and the other not? Right?
Yeah.
And I was also thinking, if you think of it in terms of advertising, like there's a lot of design that went into creating the logo for Brillo, all the text, choosing what kind of background it goes on. And in that case, is it art if you think about it in those terms? So I was thinking, what are they? Did you just look it up?
I did. They're soap pads.
Oh, okay.
So definitely not edible.
Okay. So don't try to bake. It's not an easy mix.
With rust resistor.
Nice.
Shines aluminum fast. So this one's a box of 24 giant size packages. Nice.
Okay.
Cool.
So anyway, like you can think about that Brillo advertising in terms of line, in terms of shape, in terms of texture, in terms of value, in terms of color. And in those terms, like it was very conscious choices on the people designing the advertising, how they were going to position those things on that carton.
Right.
And so those terms, like you can, if you can apply an entire artistic analysis to something, does that make it art or does that not make it art? I don't know. We're going to actually be discussing a lot of these things, and I'm really excited about our next series, which is going to be on the big question, what is art?
Right.
So we'll do like a good 5 or 6 episodes on that. Anyway, I've been preparing for that series and trying to think through some of these things. But anyway, so yeah, like I think that it does definitely help understand what you're looking at if you have those elements kind of right at your fingertips. And kind of what I like to do, since there's 5 of them, I kind of associate each one with one of my fingers, right? So like my thumb is always line, and then my pointer finger is shapes, you can just walk through and kind of assign them. So I'm just kind of like counting off on my fingers what I'm looking at.
Yeah. Sounds like I should make some sort of a graphic for that and put it on our Facebook page.
You should, if you have the time, which of course we have mounds and heaps of time just stashed away.
Of course. Just rolling in time.
Yeah, that's why we're actually doing this podcast, is because we have nothing better to do. Oh, gosh.
Hey, what should we do at 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night? Oh, let's record a podcast and then go to bed at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning and get up at 4 o'clock and go to work the next day.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think we're just moronic.
I actually kind of do sometimes. That's probably your wife texting you. Go to bed.
No, that was an email.
Oh, okay. Well, don't check it. We're recording.
I'm not checking.
You just checked it.
I was just verifying. Actually, it was a Facebook message.
Oh, there you go. See, now you're checking it again.
Notification, and it was John Blinn.
Oh, there we go. He's probably wishing he was on right now. Anyway, what we were talking about before you distracted me and all our listeners.
You don't have to watch me.
I do. You're on my screen.
You can minimize that crap.
Is that, it does help to be able to think of things in terms of those ABCs of art, but it also helps in order to process it in a responsible way, like we've been talking about, using these steps of, kind of owning your initial like gut reaction, and then like doing the hard work of like describing what you're looking at, analyzing it according to those artistic, more formal elements, then interpreting what it means, and then finally making a judgment call on it.
Yeah.
I think that's also 5 steps. So it's like you got both your hands full whenever you're looking at a piece of art. There you go.
5-step process.
Could we just call it a 10-step process?
Well, it's like 2 different things.
Not. It's 2 different things, yeah. So
the 2-handed method.
5 on 5 sounds bad.
After I said it, I realized that.
So anyway,
I think, like commenting on that real quick, like you're saying, going through these 5 steps and the other 5 steps, these 10 different steps of 5 different things.
I'm just having these horrible flashbacks to some of the episodes where we decided we were never going to use numbers again because we were so bad at
that's not gonna work. That's not gonna happen. Anyway, like what I was thinking is it causes you to, like you were saying, that like more carefully think through the art itself. And I've recently been in some Facebook interactions with some movies that are being released here in the next week to 2 weeks or so, and just not really debates, but people almost defending movies that probably shouldn't be defended, worldviews and things like that, and just trying to like tell people that we're not speaking out against the sin in the movie necessarily. Like we're not saying you can't go see this as a Christian, or Christians who watch this are in sin, but kind of having that consistent worldview of, we know we're not going to get good stuff from the world, so we have to be careful and cautious. We can't just go in there willy-nilly and be like, I'm just going to absorb whatever worldview, ideology, and bull crap that they're going to throw at me, and I'm just going to suck it in like a dry sponge. And just that's why people say things about movies or videos and books and things like that could be dangerous or could be detrimental to some Christians. If it's an immature Christian and they go to the movie The Shack, that could be a problem for them. Different things like that. So like to speak out against those things, or to caution and warn brothers and sisters in Christ, isn't to condemn them for watching it if they do watch it. It's just to caution them and warn them that these things are in this, or this is what the worldview and motivation behind the artist, the writer, or the director, and that is what they are putting into their art. So you are getting that worldview, and we have to be cognizant of that. We can't just look at it, listen to it, watch it, whatever, without any thinking. And so going through this process has helped me also, where am I not being consistent? Am I saying, oh, The Shack is terrible, Beauty and the Beast is supposed to have an exclusively gay scene, and all these, Daredevil has... Wow. And you talk about me? But, no, and we speak out against those movies, but then at home we let our kids watch cartoons on Netflix that are probably doing the same things, And so to be consistent is vital, and to really take your time and think through pieces of art, and judging them correctly, not starting at the beginning and judging them, but knowing about them, what makes them art, how are they put together, is it well done, and is it worth our while? Some movies, some things may not be worthwhile. They're just entertainment, and so they're not going to be in the grand scheme of things, another idea that I've been kind of talking with our small group about recently as well. In the grand scheme of things, our life on this earth is like a dust mite. Like it is nothing in comparison to eternity. And how vital and how many Christians really defend and stand up and smack down other Christians for speaking out against the movie they want to go see. Like, seriously, it's like a 2-hour movie in your life that will probably do nothing for you in your relationship with God. Is it really worth fighting over? Is it really worth even going to see? Like, how are we using our time? Are we being consistent? So, I don't know. That's my little rant, I guess, that I've been kind of dealing with over the last couple weeks on Facebook and social media and conversations in small group and stuff like that. So, I don't know. I thought it was useful, and I thought it was something that maybe it's not. It is for me. It's what I've been going through. It's what I've been, convicted about and been dealing with, and just trying to live that consistently Christian life across the spectrum, and not just where, that convenient conservative idea, like, well, this is the area where I want to do that, but over here I'm going to speak out, the devil. And over here I'm like, well, this is this way because I think blah, blah, blah. And it's just, it's not consistent. It's not proper. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I've been doing research for our upcoming series, I've come across what are called aesthetic attitude theorists, and some of it actually ends up being a little bit of a seedbed for some of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah,
where these philosophers and thinkers and art critics are saying, it's all about how you like aesthetics and having this very aesthetic experience where it's like you're enraptured looking at a piece of art, or you like dive into it and it has like this very profound experience on you and you're giving all of yourself to it. And it's kind of like an ecstasy almost. Like in order to have that, you have to approach the art. And they usually use the term with distance. And they'll use that term distance very particularly, saying you have to distance yourself and put yourself completely out of gear with all of your day-to-day concerns.
Yeah.
And just approach the art without any of those things in mind so you can fully engage with it. And while I do firmly believe in being an attentive viewer when you're viewing a piece of artwork, like you can't just cut yourself off from the rest of life. Human beings don't even operate that way. We're holistic beings. You don't just have like this unique like part of your psyche that only deals with aesthetics. Like it's wrapped in with everything else. And so when you approach a piece of art with that kind of quote unquote aesthetic distance, and you kind of throw it out of gear with all other day-to-day concerns, especially morality, like you're talking about, Cody, then you're setting yourself up for a dangerous situation, because art isn't just about experience. Art isn't just about ecstasy. Art isn't just about emotion. Art is also about communication.
Right.
I would even argue essentially about communication.
Yeah.
And so if you're not reading it as a text as well as viewing it as an image, you're not dealing with it holistically. You're not dealing with it appropriately. And so messages are coming at you that you are not dealing with in a healthy way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like you said, Cody, I think that a lot of Christians have been affected by that kind of aesthetic attitude where they say, yeah, I just want to go into the movie theater and I want to throw that movie viewing experience out of gear with the rest of my day-to-day grind, right? I want to have my moment alone with this piece of art where it's just me and the artwork and I let it impact me. And when they do that, they throw it out of gear with their Christianity, with their moral framework, with all of these other considerations, with basically the kingdom of Christ. Right. And when they do that, they're actually kind of idolizing artwork and worshiping at the shrine of the art god in a lot of ways. And that, I completely agree with you. That's not okay. We shouldn't do that. And so, more serious viewing where you can go, if you do go to the Shack, you're not just paying attention to this, the cinematography and everything. You're also listening to the message, but then taking it a step further, which is really what we're advocating, and seeing how the cinematography, how all of those basic artistic elements are actually the nuts and bolts that go into creating that message, and in some ways that heretical message, like the music that goes into it, the scene cuts, the characters, the lighting, the costume design is all part of that message that film is sending. It's part and parcel with it. You can't parse it out.
Right. Yeah.
And so you have to be paying attention to those things as well. And yeah, I think that's more responsible viewing, definitely. So, when I think black female Jesus, is that correct?
No.
I haven't read the book. Is that the Holy Spirit that's portrayed that way, or God the Father?
No, that's God, and then the Holy Spirit is an Asian woman.
Okay. So, like, if when black female God, the not Father, is talking to the gentleman who's going there for healing, and there's sentimental music playing and soft lighting, and like this intimate camera angles that are supposed to get you in with the characters.
Yeah.
That's all impacting you emotionally a certain way and giving you cues on how you're supposed to think and feel about what's being portrayed. And a responsible viewer will be going through that more in-depth artistic analysis, interpretation, and judgment. And the nice thing is that the more you do it, the more fluid it gets.
Right.
And you can just be like, yes, I'm listening to the message. My gut reaction is I hate it. I disagree with it. I want to see what else is going on. I want to make sure that what's being portrayed on screen is actually what the author is communicating, that sort of thing. Because like you said, Cody, sometimes, and this might be the case with Beauty and the Beast. I haven't seen it yet, obviously. Right. But like maybe they're putting that exclusively gay scene in because of cultural pressures, especially like other Hollywood directors and producers like putting pressure on Disney to include those things, when maybe the director wouldn't do that on his own. I've actually been thinking, how horrible would it be to be a writer in Hollywood right now? Because you know that for the next several years, they're going to have pressure put on them to create homosexual romances. Yeah. Which they probably are completely unfamiliar with. So that means that may be unfamiliar with. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but they may be unfamiliar with, or that the rest of the country is completely unfamiliar with. And so they're creating scenes, they're creating characters that are basically disingenuous, dishonest creations because of societal pressures. Yeah. And I really feel bad for them. So, if the entire movie is about something different and that one scene is thrown in there, you can be like, yes, this is off key with the rest of the message. I don't have to, I can appreciate the film and, and understand why this is here. Yeah. At the same time, those sorts of things. Anyway, we should probably talk about color a little bit. Yeah, are you ready to talk about it?
It's a good rabbit trail, though. But yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. So color's interesting, and we're not going to get into like the science of it because you can go really far down that rabbit hole.
Oh yeah.
But we're going to start kind of with the basics, of course, with the basic color wheel. And in the Art of Redemption logo, you'll notice 3 colors, and these are the 3 primary colors. So you got red, you got yellow, and you got blue. Yeah. That's why when you change your printer cartridge, there's cyan, blue, magenta, red, and yellow, right? Mm-hmm. And usually there's a black toner cartridge, because anytime that those specific inks are sprayed onto paper, what's happening is white light with all of the colors in it is hitting the page, and then the page is absorbing all of those colors except the one that's bouncing back at you. So if you spray yellow ink on a page, then the white light hits it with all of the colors in it. Yellow bounces back at your eye, and gets absorbed by your cones, and the rest of the colors are absorbed into the page. And so the more that you mix and layer those colors, the more interesting things that bouncing of the light does to create the full color spectrum as we know it.
Yeah, that's why when you like these photo printers, like the one that I've got has multiple colors. I think it's got 16 cartridges of color.
Whoa.
So
yeah.
So you get a lot better, more realistic looking color than what you would with just like my other printer for just printing pages, whatever off of pages in the Mac store or whatever. You just have black, and then you have the multicolor, which runs out like in 2 weeks. It seems like, for whatever reason. I don't even use color that much. I don't know. It's weird. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, it's a lot different when you have those 2 little cartridges as opposed to 16, the color gamut that you can cover that way. It's pretty cool.
Well, you know about the color ink cartridge gnomes, don't you?
Gnomes?
Yeah, they're
Like
the
the
little
little
guys
gnomes?
that like hide in your office, and then they come at night when you're sleeping, and they suck all of the color ink out of your cartridges because that's what they live on. So you
That would
just need to
explain their
get
colorful
some.
clothing.
You just get some color gnome traps, and you'll probably be okay. Problem solved. No, I do know what you mean. It's like you print like one page, and your entire printer is out of ink. You're like, what the heck?
And
Or
then
the
it
worst
won't
thing.
print anything.
Or the worst thing is when you run out of one color and all of the other colors are full and you can't print a single darn thing because you're out of one color. It's always magenta for me for some reason. I don't know why.
This last week I was printing off papers for the elders and deacons and stuff, and I was using black. I ran out of black, so I was like, I'll just change it to like dark blue. Well, it wouldn't print dark blue. It wouldn't print light blue. It wouldn't print any colors because my printer's like, I can't handle this. I can't print. And it was so annoying. So I had to email it to myself, then go up to the church and try to print it off there, and then make copies, and then it was a pain.
Sounds like one of those decapitated chicken deals.
Yeah.
So anyway, you got your primary colors, yellow, red, and blue, and then you got your secondary colors. So if you mix red and yellow together, you're going to get orange. If you mix red and blue together, you're going to get violet, and if you mix yellow and blue together, you're going to get green. Yeah. So that's where those secondary colors come from. And then you have what's called, so most people know about primary and secondary colors. That's where most people kind of stop. But the next level is called tertiary colors, and that's where you combine a secondary color, so orange, green, or violet, with one of the primary colors to get kind of a different tone. Or a different value.
Gotcha.
And so that's kind of where I wanted to get today, because my absolute favorite graphic novel of all time, which is, Cody?
Watchman?
Yes, Watchman, is amazing because the guy who inked it, his name is... I actually don't think that I know his name right off the top.
I thought it was like David something.
Dave Gibbons.
Yeah,
I think is the guy. I don't know if Dave Gibbons is the guy who drew the panels and inked it and colored it, or just drew the panels and inked it. I think they might have sent it off to a third guy to color it. Anyway, I can look that up later. But what the colorist did is that for 90, I think probably 80 or 90% of the graphic novel, he used almost exclusively tertiary colors, which was completely groundbreaking for comics, because comics, colors impact you in different ways. So primary colors are very vibrant, and they have a high degree of saturation, so they're super bright. Yeah. So they really pop off the page, especially when you're printing comics, which is why most of your Marvel and DC comics and all the superheroes in them have primary colors as part of their costumes. So blue, red, and yellow are almost exclusively superhero costumes. And so in this novel, Watchmen, to have the colorist use almost exclusively tertiary colors, so that's going to be like off colors where it's not exactly orange and it's not exactly red. It's somewhere in between. It's not exactly green and it's not exactly blue. It's somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And it's really muted and less vibrant. Creates an entirely different atmosphere and something that had never been seen in comics before. So I'm going to share my screen with you, Cody, real quick so that our viewers can see this.
And while you're doing that, I'll take the time to let the listeners know, if you're on a podcast and your app and you're listening to this, we're going to be dropping this out also on YouTube so you can actually see video of this podcast. So our first live recording / not live recording podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for that infomercial. Okay, so I have this up here, Cody, and you can see
I actually
this
can't see.
Okay, I'm not sharing my.
I can see you.
You can't see my screen. What I'm sharing with you?
No, I cannot.
I'm sharing my screen. I promise.
Well, you must not be sharing very well.
Well, yeah, either that or you're looking at the wrong thing.
I don't think so. I'm looking right at you.
There's not like a window that says or that shows what I'm looking at.
No. Last time it just popped up right here, and you went away down here in a little screen, and what you were looking at was right here.
All right, well, we'll try it again. So I'm going to share screen. I'm going to go to Chrome.
Hey, there we go. Now I've got it.
Okay. So I'm sharing my screen with you, and you can see this is just a page from the graphic novel, and this particular chapter is focusing on Dr. Manhattan, one of the characters, who happens to be blue. So you'll notice that his blue is not like a primary like cyan type of like highly saturated blue that you would see on Captain America or Superman, right? It's this kind of like, it's a very dialed down, a very dialed down kind of lighter shade of maybe that type of color. And then you'll see that it's complemented on either side by light pinks and light purples.
Yeah.
Which are neither primary or secondary colors. And so it creates this completely kind of different atmosphere than you would expect. And it's creates a completely different mood. So what kind of mood does that communicate?
To me, it seems kind of like almost like a memory.
Yeah, and that's perfect because he's looking at a photograph and he's talking about a previous relationship he had.
Right.
The main character is. So that kind of like introspective, reminiscent, quiet, contemplative attitude comes through in a lot of ways because of the colors that are being chosen.
Yeah, I was gonna say all those words. I didn't want to do it up front, so I just said memory.
Yeah, thank you for not stealing my thunder. I really appreciate that. And then to make matters more interesting, what he does is that later on in the graphic novel, when certain like high action moments happen, then he'll use a lot of very vibrant reds and magentas and stuff like that, which creates this interesting like punctuation and a whole entire visual rhythm that is at an entire another level than you get from most comic books. So in a lot of ways, this is kind of artistry at its finest. And even this comic book person who's choosing the colors for a comic book is doing so very consciously.
Yeah.
And very purposely. So that's kind of tertiary colors, and then to get those primary colors like we were talking about, are you familiar with the artist Roy Lichtenstein?
No, but it sounds fun.
Well, besides the fact that he shares my name, which is just absolutely cool, I just love this artist. He's a very popular artist, and he does what's called pop art.
Yeah.
And so what we're looking at right here is one of his pieces called Wonder Woman, obviously, because it's Wonder Woman.
Looks like it.
And the thing that makes his art interesting is that it's done on a gigantic scale.
Oh.
So a person standing in front of this, I don't know how big this particular piece is, but it's probably like between 8 and 11 or 13 feet. They're usually very large pieces.
Wow.
And it's really the scale that makes these things amazing and completely transforms them. So, I don't want to get too much into the theory behind his artwork, but kind of commenting on maybe the superficiality of our current culture and how we're addicted to boiling things down to their absolute stereotypes, some different things like that. So he uses that as a comment, but you can see like part of the way we know this is comics is because of the yellow, the red, and the blue in her hair, right? Yeah. That like immediately triggers us and tells us, okay, this is a comic book character, and this is supposed to be like mass producible, basically, and easily read at a glance. So the question is, are people easily read at a glance?
Like real people?
Yeah.
Not normally. I mean,
and
it can be, but not usually very often anyway. I don't know.
And when you read somebody at a glance, how often do you end up being right about them? Like if you actually like sit down and get to know them?
Not very. Yeah. I mean, there's, that don't judge a book by its cover kind of idea. And, you can, but it's not necessarily going to always be correct or accurate.
Yeah, and it's usually not very loving. Like,
No.
Even if somebody, is on the sidewalk and they're probably asking for cash and stuff, if you like take some time to talk to them, they usually have a very full life. They've usually had people very close to them, people that they cared about. Like, they're very complex individuals. They are, in fact, creatures made in God's image and likeness. Mm-hmm. They're actually creatures that God took time to create, that he formed them in their mother's womb, all of the stuff talked about in the Psalms. And so they're not reducible down to a stereotype. And for Roy Lichtenstein to create these gigantic paintings that kind of parody our obsession with stereotyping and basically like having these paradigms of like female beauty, for example, and things like that. I think it's pretty powerful, on also very engaging. So he is definitely using primary colors to his advantage. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about was actually the Lord of the Rings. You thought that we had got done talking about Lord of the Rings, but
we're doing this just for Paul.
Here it comes again. And we did actually touch on this when we were talking about Lord of the Rings. We were talking about how over the series, the saturation in the actual like camera filters that they're using is reduced to the point where at the end you almost have these like chromatic grays and very earthy tones.
Right, yeah.
And so instead of having those bright primary colors of reds, yellows, blues, or even the secondary colors of greens, oranges, and purples, like you don't even hardly see any green in the Return of the King, like maybe a couple of times. Yeah. But even when they're in the forest, it's usually dialed down to the point where it's kind of like this light gray green and things like that. So it's they're also, and that's done very much on purpose to kind of show the growing darkness. Right. So as darkness spreads, color is washed out of the film itself in order to communicate kind of the growing gloom, the growing despair, and the growing bleakness of this world.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I think they do an awesome job of that. That's probably one of my favorite things in the movie series, of just that overarching evil that starts to take over. And we watched what did we watch recently? Moana, that cartoon with the it's like a Hawaiian islander kind of movie, and there's kind of this idea.
Mona.
Yeah, Moana.
Disney.
Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting movie, actually. But there's that kind of idea, that kind of growing darkness as well, and like things start, getting dark and disappearing and whatnot. And I think they do kind of a cartoon version of that. But I think Lord of the Rings just nails it in that aspect of things really well.
Yeah. And it's also interesting that they kind of tried to do the same thing for the Hobbit series. And in the Hobbit series, it doesn't work as well.
Right, yeah.
Because it doesn't actually follow the message, right?
Yeah.
Because it really is a children's book, and it's supposed to, although there's a great battle at the end, it's not as desperate as they try to make it out to be in the films. And it's much more mythical, it's much more fanciful, and so it just doesn't work in the same ways. And so, color can be used by artists to like trigger emotion.
Yeah.
And it can also be used very like symbolically. In America, blue is usually trustworthy, but that's something it's interesting that color on a symbolic level is very culturally attuned. Mm-hmm. So I have a quote here that I wanted to read you about. This is by Alexander Thoreau in The Primary Colors. This is a book. It says, "Blue is the symbol of baby boys in America, mourning in Borneo, tribulation to the American Indian, and direction south in Tibet. Blue indicates mercy in Kabbalah and carbon monoxide gas in canisters. Chinese emperors wore blue to worship the sky. To Egyptians, it represented virtue, faith, and truth. The color was worn by slaves in Gaul. It was the color of the sixth level of the temple of Nebuchadnezzar II, devoted to the planet Mercury. In Jerusalem, a blue hand painted on a door gives protection, and in East Africa, blue beads represent fertility." So I think it's just interesting that the way we use color is very much a part of our language in a lot of ways, and is used to communicate, even if it's down to the basic thing of which direction to take, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of an interesting thing, that blue is the direction south for that culture. So anyway, I think that color is one of those things where it exists so much in our subconscious that we usually don't even realize it, and realize how color in what we're watching is impacting us and affecting us.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So what do you think then of like black and whites?
Well, when we talked about the episode on value, I think that it's very interesting that without a color palette to work with, it's a restriction that you're supposed to communicate, even communicate the same emotions, but you don't get to use color to do it. So you have to figure out creative ways of solving that problem with value by itself.
Right.
And it kind of forces you into this interesting creative predicament that you have to solve. And that's why I really respect the directors and filmers of black and white cinema so much, is because they're able to do what a lot of modern directors do with color, just by the way they, position a single light in a frame, and stuff like that. So it's definitely, it's one of those things where it's like when you write poetry, and you're writing a sonnet, the lines have to be a certain length. you're supposed to stick to a certain rhyme scheme. So it's restrictive, but it's a restrictive in a way that forces you to be more creative.
Right.
So I think that's really cool too, and can be super effective.
Yeah, because I'd say that, color is definitely, like, I kind of go back and forth with my photography. I like to do, I really like sunset stuff and really contrasting scenes. But then sometimes I like to just do black and whites. And Ansel Adams is probably one of my favorite black and white photographers out there. Well, he's dead, but I just love his art and the way that he takes a picture of a snowy field with like a lone tree, and I don't know, just the dynamic and the contrast even with just black and white is pretty amazing. But yeah, I think the lack of color also can communicate a lot too, and I guess we did talk about that in the value section, but I don't know, I thought I'd bring it up again.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was actually something that was really interesting when I was doing some of my earliest duct tape art.
Yeah.
Is that I was restricted to basically a primary and secondary color palette.
Right.
And so I had to be very creative in the way that I used those.
Yeah.
So choosing colors like for the Joker, green and purple that are kind of traditionally part of his outfit and that also complement each other really well. And choosing, how to arrange those so that, because when you put, if you're thinking of like a teal against a white background versus a black background versus like a blue background, if you put teal up against blue, it's going to appear very green. But if you put teal up against green, it's going to appear very blue, right? So it's actually the color in contrast to the other colors around it. It's a relationship thing that actually kind of like changes the way you look at it. So figuring out how those colors would play off of each other was very interesting.
Yeah.
And now that's actually one of the reasons why I switched to gaffer's tape is because I can paint acrylic over the top of it.
Okay.
So I can make my own color palettes, and now I can, I can do more things with that color palette.
Gotcha. Nice.
Excited to do that. That pretty much I think wraps up pretty much everything I was wanting to get to this episode.
Right on.
How about you?
I think so too. I spoke my pieces that I felt like I wanted to say.
He spoke his piece. Awesome. Well,
I've done my part.
Thanks for sharing some more of your time with us this week. I definitely hope that you're ready to go, view art responsibly, go investigate the links between worldview and art, especially in the city you live, the people that you're around, the books that you're reading, the music you're listening to, and the movies you're watching. And we really hope to spend some more time with you next week.
Peace out.
Lift up your shoulders, child, breathe in. Carry the weight of love you've been given. Storm is passing by, light breaks in as you learn to sing. Every color can be unwound, woven into a wave of beautiful sound. Open the heavenlies and shake the ground and change the world. So let all the creatures sing. tapestry we all are in. No one will ever be forgotten. There's a place for us. So let all the creatures sing praises over everything. Colors are made to bring glory to the light. So let all the creatures sing praises over everything. Colors are meant to bring glory to the throne. This is our story. This is our song. We're telling it slow.